Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, thank you to hearing our presentation, and this presentation is about Imam Tirmizi, about his life. Okay, for introduction, in this assignment, it focuses on one the hadith members who has authored one of the book of Sunan As-Sittah, which is Imam At-Tirmizi. This assignment focuses on the narration of life, as well as matters related to the history of hadith collection by Imam Tirmizi. He was well-known hadith member of many scholars for his credibility in the collection and developing al-hadith study during his time. He gathered hadith, then assembled it. The famous book that Imam Tirmizi is known as Sunan Tirmizi. Sunan at-Tirmizi is one of the books that are famous and one of the Sunan of four. Generally, hadith in Sunan Tirmizi are accepted to be used as an argument. This book contains hadith of law, although there is more emphasis on hadith related to adab and tafsir. That's all for the introduction. Then let's go to the next slide.
So next we move to the dissemination education in Tirmidh. The territory of Khorasan in which lies the town of Tirmidh, which is Tirmidh, is one of the towns in the Khorasan and the neighboring countries of Transylvania were before Islam the scene of multiplicity of various creeds and beliefs, living side by side, but each having its own cause of extravagance and bigotry. The general atmosphere prevailing then in the territory was therefore charged with conflict, diversity and religious prejudice. As is natural for such an area situated as it was between the various religious beliefs, also the people of the area were a medley of diverse races, which is Turks, Indians, Persians, and the diversity of these races and their coexistence in this part of the world had a far-reaching effect in promoting the diversification of their thoughts, tendencies, and sentiments, which is before Islam. Their tendencies to their own race is very high. So when Islam came, these tendencies were decreased, and they were subsequently of a great effect in affecting the political, social, and intellectual situation. Perhaps this may account for the multiplicity of schools of thought, political affiliation, social trends, and cultural structures which developed in the area under the rule of Islam. During the 3rd century of the Islamic era in particular, various intellectual attitudes began to take shape, and one of the strongest was the religious enterprise for the collection, classification, and shifting of the prophetic traditions. The movement gathered momentum and soon grew so prevalent that it became the overall mark of culture in the area. Nothing can be more indicative of the depth and the predominance of this cultural ferment than the fact that the 6 most famous compilers of tradition, such as Al-Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, An-Nasa'i, At-Tirmizi, and Ibn Majah, were all from this territory, which is from Khorasan.
The scholars of Tirmizi. There are many Muslim scholars in Tirmizi. One of them is Hakim Tirmizi. He was not only known as a fiqh scholar and hadith expert in the 2nd and 3rd century Hijriah, he was even better known as one of the earlier great authors in the field of Sufism. In the latest scientific research, the most complete bibliographic study from the history of life to the thoughts and writing of Hakim Tirmizi was produced by the scholar and expert of the Moroccan manuscript. Sheikh Dr. Khalid Zahri, Sheikh Khalid, produced his magnum opus, Hakim Khurasan wa Anis al-Zaman, after taking more than 12 years to read, analyze, and study every writing related to the figure, which was also published by the Association of Moroccan Scholars in 2013. The study also revealed that Hakim Tirmizi included the earliest scholars who formulated the principle of Sharia Maqasid, the purpose of Sharia law, such as the book Al-Salat wa Maqasiduha. Hakim Tirmizi served as the curator of the manuscript at the Royal Moroccan Library, the Hassanah Library, located in Rabat Palace. Other than that, Sayyid Ali Akbar was an Islamic figure, the son of 12 Shiite scholar. According to Shia Islam, he was the 11th, 12th Imam, Hassan al-Askari, and the brother of the 12th Imam, Hujjat Allah al-Mahdi. His existence is disputed and rejected by Shiite historians because of contemporary political conflicts between the divine appointment to imamah of his father and brother, and because of discord with the political leadership of the Abbasids. According to the earliest reports, as cited below from official family tree documents and records, Imam Hassan al-Askari fathered 7 children and was survived by 6. The names of his illustrious biological children were Imam Muhammad al-Mahdi, Musa Ja'far Ibrahim, Fatima, Aisha, and Ali, sometimes referred to as Akbar, Asghar, Al-Taqi, Al-Muttaqi, or Abdullah. Besides that, Hazrat Sayyid Ali Tirmizi, or also known as Pir Baba, was a scholar in Tirmiz. He was born in 1502 Anno Domini in a respectable Sayyid family in Kunar province of Afghanistan. He was son of Sayyid Kanbar Ali Shah and grandson of Sayyid Ahmed Noor. Pir Baba got his early education from his grandfather, Sayyid Ahmed Noor. Pir Baba left his materialistic world in the month of Rajab in 991 Hijri, 1583 Anno Domini. Pir Baba's grave and shrine along with his son Hazrat Sayyid Habib Shah Tirmizi radiallahu anhu, who was unmarried.
The biography of Imam Tirmizi. Imam Al-Hafiz Muhammad bin Isa bin Sawrah bin Musa As-Sulami At-Tirmizi, also known as Abu Isa. He is one of the eminent hadith scholars and author of various famous books. He was born in Turmus in month of Zulhijjah 209 Hijri, and he died on 13 Hijrajab in 217 Hijri when he was 17 years old. He is better known as At-Tirmizi because he attributes it to his birthplace, Turmus. Some scholars say that he had been blind from birth, but the truth is he suffered from blindness in his old age, that is, the time after he was much traveled to seek the knowledge. The book of Sunan At-Tirmizi is one of the 6 famous books of hadith called Kutub As-Sittah, that is Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Sunan Tirmizi, Sunan Abi Dawud, Sunan An-Nasa'i, and Sunan Ibn Majah. The grandfather of Imam Tirmizi descended from Mirwais, then moved to Tirmus, then settled there, and it was in this city that his grandson named Abu Isa was born. At a young age, he loved to study. In addition to ever studying in Khorasan, he also visited various districts to deepen his knowledge, especially in field of hadith and jurisprudence, such as to Basrah, Kufa, Hijaz, and others. At-Tirmizi is widely known as scholars as a person pious, kind, ascetic, and obedient. As Hufaz who is not remembering something perfectly and his memory are strong, Dobit. Many scholars who receive hadith from his narration, not anyone who doubts his sincerity in religion and is viewed as wrong a person who is quite careful in narrating hadith.
Next, we move to the upbringing and education of Imam Tirmizi. Since he was a child, he has an extraordinary intelligence, vigor, and memorable abilities. Tirmizi has a keen interest in various disciplines, especially hadith, and visit many Eastern countries in order to continuously improve his knowledge. He studied hadith in the 235 Hijrah when he was over 20 years old. He had went to Iraq, Isfahan, Khurasan, Basra, Kufah, Wasit, Mecca, and Medina, and lived there for many years. Usually, a great person is born because of a great teacher. Tirmizi have studied with many famous teachers and scholars. He was able to meet with great scholars in the field of hadith studies because at the time the knowledge of hadith developed rapidly. This development of hadith relates with the movement that has been made by Imam Shafi'i that has been called Nasir as-Sunnah. His teachers were Imam Bukhari, Muhammad ibn Bashr, Imam Muslim, Imam Abu Dawud, Qutaybah ibn Sa'ad al-Madini, Ismail bin Musa al-Wazari, Ali ibn Hajar, Muslim ibn al-Hujjaj, Mahmud ibn Ghailan, and other famous scholars. According to sources, Tirmizi used every opportunity to collect and study hadith. He immediately wrote down the hadith he had heard from his teachers and narrators, whether on a journey or staying in a place. From all teachers of Tirmizi, the one that has given him the greatest influence is Imam Bukhari. At-Tirmizi lived with Al-Bukhari in the same period of time, so he has been able to learn from Imam Bukhari. For example, he had learned Ilalul Hadith from Imam Bukhari. He also acknowledged the high-level knowledge in Imam Bukhari by saying, I do not see anyone either in Iraq or in Khurasan that seek knowledge of Allah, the history of the narrator, and the detailed information of the hadith changed deeper than Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Bukhari. In addition of mastering the knowledge of hadith, Imam at-Tirmizi is also knowledgeable in the field of fiqh. He has studied the opinion of the fuqaha from the members of the Ra'yi thinkers who are live in Kufah, such as Abu Hanifah, Ibn Abi Layth, and others. Imam at-Tirmizi has studied the fiqh of Imam al-Malik from Ishaq bin Musa al-Ansari and Abi Mus'ab al-Madani, who are both Imam Malik's students. He also participated studying the fiqh of Imam Shafi'i from Al-Hasan bin Muhammad al-Zafirani and Arabi bin Sulaiman. He studied fiqh al-Hadith by studying the opinions of Ahmad bin Hanbal, Ishaq bin Rahuyah, and Sufyan as-Suri.
And then let's take a look at the scholars and researchers of view of Imam at-Tirmizi. Firstly, we take a look about criticism. Some of hadith in Sunan at-Tirmizi has been criticized by other scholars. Among them are Ibn Jawzi, Ibn Taymiyyah, and his son at-Tahahab. They have criticized the 13 hadiths found in the Sunan's Mawdu' hadith. However, this criticism has met with opposition from Al-Hafiz Jalaluddin As-Sayuti. The fact is, most of the hadiths that are at low degree are contained in the chapter of Al-Fada'il, and it is not a strange this because none of these great scholars will narrate the hadith mawdu' if they are aware of its degree except by starting clearly. It is clear here that although Ibn Jawzi and others consider it to be a hadith mawdu', it is not for Al-Imam Tirmizi. Secondly, about praise. Many scholars and hadith scholars acknowledge the strength and superiority of Imam Tirmizi. Apart from that, his piety to Allah is also undoubted. Among them is Ibn Hibban al-Busti, who acknowledged Tirmizi's ability in memorizing, compiling and studying hadith, thus making himself a source of hadith collection by famous scholars including Imam Bukhari. There are also scholars who reveal Imam Tirmizi is a person who is trustworthy and very meticulous. Mash at-Tahir, an author of the book Jami' al-Usul, says Sunan Tirmizi is a sunan who has many benefits and neat arrangement, as well as the least repetition of hadith. In it, there is something that is not in the work of others. Starting from mentioning the school and its argument and evidence, explaining the type of hadith, whether sahih, hasan, da'if and so on, al-jarh wa ta'dil, al-ilal, at the end of his book, and many others previous. Many scholars praise Al-Tirmizi's personality, among others who said Al-Bukhari has died and he did not leave his disciples in the Great Khurasan knowledgeable and humble as At-Tirmizi. And then we go to the researcher's view. Apart from being known as a member and memorizer of hadith, knowing the weakness and narrators, Imam Tirmizi was also known as a jurist and broad-minded. The views of fiqh, for example, can be found in his book Al-Jami'. For the researcher, his studies on the question of fiqh reflect himself as a very experienced scholar and expert in real problems. Among the muhaddisin, the book of Sunan Tirmizi is the main reference, in addition to other books of hadith from Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim. This book is considered very important because it is very careful in determining the evaluation of hadith by explicitly quoting authentic hadith. That is the reason this book ranks fourth in the order of Kutubus Sittah, or according to the author of the book Kashfu Az-Zunun, Haji Al-Khalfah, the position of Sunan Tirmizi is on the third floor in the hierarchy of Kutubus Sittah. Therefore, Imam Tirmizi always give a description of value of hadith, even comparison, description and its conclusion.
Assalamualaikum. So now we start with another slide. It's all about Imam Tirmizi contribution in Islam. Imam Tirmizi began his jihad by studying religion since he was young. He took knowledge of the Sheikh in his region. Second, his famous work is the book of Al-Jami', which also belongs to the one of Kutubus Sittah, which is the six major books of hadith field and the famous hadith encyclopedia. Al-Jami' al-Sahih is one of the most important books in the Sunni Islamic work. According to historian Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, At-Tirmizi wrote this work in 884 Hijr, when he was around 60 years old. The unique style of Abu Isa Tirmizi in hadith technique is that the hadith then transmit it the relationship to the level of Sahih, Hasan, Poor and Gharib. Then he will elaborate on the hadith narrator, the change of transmission and the fact of hadith.
Conclusion. In conclusion, first, and foremost are Tirmizi's fascination with science and his ardent interest in science and his endeavor to overcome all difficulties in this regard was greatly admired by his desire to increase his knowledge. Written sources say that the science of hadith became one of the most important and necessary subjects from the second half of the 8th to the mid-11th century. During this time, more than 400 authors from different countries of the East were engaged in this hadith. By the 3rd century in Hijriah, a number of collections on hadith were compiled. Imam Tirmizi was one of those scholars who contributed greatly towards this field of hadith. In this modern age, the world at large is deeply indebted to Imam Tirmizi for his compilation of hadith. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it possible for all of us to benefit tremendously from this priceless collection of hadith.